I can. Look at that. All right. So I think we're going to start since it's 9:05 and we have a good group of people here. So my name's Hillary Kane, and I think, the outgoing. I'm no longer the co-chair of the CCC, which I'm actually quite excited about because that means there's new leadership. Former co-chair of the Coordinated Campaign Committee, which is the committee at the national level in the Green Party that is charged with supporting candidates and campaigns. And one of the ways we do that is through this ongoing training series. It's sort of like a virtual campaign school. And every month we have a different topic. And tonight is, I think how we build it is slightly different than the way Andy has the title here. But basically, if we're talking about combining party building and campaigning, they are not either or, they can be both and. So I am going to, let's try to go around the country the best we can and hear who is on the call. And of course, if you're a candidate, please let us know that. And then I'm going to turn it over to Andy for him to do his spiel. I don't know how long it'll take, maybe about a half an hour, 40 minutes, and then we'll open it up for Q&A. And that's about it. So let's try to go from the southwest to the northeast of the country. So anyone in the southwest want to say hello?
I'll say hello.
And tell us
My
who you
name
are.
is Janice Richards. I'm running as Jan Richards for governor of Texas. And I will not have ballot access on the Green Party, although we're working to get it now. And we have a lawsuit going for the future. But for this election, I will flip over and run as an independent write-in.
Okay. Anyone more southwest than Janice? I think I heard Taos.
Well, this is Susan McCarthy. I'm in Taos, New Mexico, but I'm not a candidate. We have just transitioned our officers of the Green Party, and we have a very gung-ho new co-chair who wants to bring in a lot of young voters. But we don't have a candidate right now running.
Okay. Great. Anyone else further southwest? All right. Anyone in the northwest of the country?
I'm Tanya Atkinson. I'm from Seattle area in Snohomish County. But I'm a facilitator of the Snohomish County Green Party, and I'm just trying to get a capture of what our new candidates look like and how to access that.
Great. Welcome. Anyone else from that part of the country? Moving east, anyone in the mountain states? Okay, central time zone, north of Texas, or other parts of Texas. Oh, really? Everyone else is in the far north, in the east, I guess. Maybe it's the timing. Maybe I guess it's, it could be hard to certainly be on these calls if it's earlier in the day. So, Lori, that is some serious feedback that I'm going to. Barbara, I think it's you. Yeah. So I'm Barbara. Sorry, I had to put you on mute because of that feedback. But Barbara Berry from Connecticut is on. Why don't we start in the southeast? Anyone from Florida, and then work our way up? All right. The South.
I'm in Georgia. This is Jimmy Cooper. I'm running for Georgia's 8th Congressional District of the United States House of Representatives. Most likely, I'll end up being a write-in candidate.
Okay, great. And is that because of ballot access? Not that I want to get a whole long story. I'm just trying to get a quick sense.
Oh, yeah. Serious ballot access issues here.
Got it. Well, welcome aboard. Welcome. Anyone north of Georgia? The upper South.
Ben Plume with the Kentucky Green Party, wanting to run or planning to run in the Kentucky Senate race.
Great. Welcome.
Thank you.
What's your name?
Ben Plume.
What?
Ben Plume, as in a plume of smoke, or
Yes.
feather?
Feather. Yes.
Fabulous. Okay. Anyone north of Kentucky, Mid-Atlantic?
I'm from Indiana. My name is Michael Richardson. We're running a candidate for the Indiana Secretary of State, and just kind of juggling that. We're trying to rebuild the party.
Great. Welcome. All right. Anything east of Indiana, north of Kentucky? Have at it.
Joe Crane in Kansas City, Missouri. I'm running for the Missouri Senate seat, federal Senate seat.
Great.
Coming in from Michigan here. My name is Jessica Smith. I'm running for the 14th state Senate seat here in Michigan.
Well, fabulous. I heard that there's a lot of candidates in Michigan this year. That's quite exciting.
Yeah, we just had our nominating convention just a few days ago on Saturday.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
All right. Anyone else?
I guess while we're saying hi from Michigan, hi Hillary.
Hi.
Hi everyone. It's Aaron Fox, and I'm an incoming co-chair of the CCC. I'm real excited for that, and I'm excited to hear Andy's presentation. It's going to be a great presentation. Thanks everybody for being on the call tonight.
Great. Anyone else?
Chris Robinson here from Philadelphia.
Hello, Chris.
I'm not running for office, but I'm working on the Paul Glover campaign for governor of Pennsylvania.
Excellent. I saw another 267 number just pop in. Was somebody else from Philly joining us?
Yep, this is Robert Alway.
Hello, Robert. Welcome. All right. Any other last-minute folks joining who want to introduce themselves?
Yep. My name is Joshua Gerloff. I'm from Ipswich, Massachusetts, and I am chair for the working group that's helping 3 statewide candidates run for office here.
Great. All right. All right. Well, I think we have 24 people on the line, which is fabulous. What I am going to do is mute everyone, not myself, whoops, except for Andy. So I'm going to try to see if I can pull that off. That way there's not a lot of background noise because, you know, there's always crying babies and barking dogs and sirens and, you know, all kinds of stuff. So I'm going to turn it over to Andy, and we're going to let him go. And at the end, we'll ask questions and have a good discussion. So take it away, Andy.
Great. Well, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about this. Mostly what I'm going to talk about tonight is the way that we've used elections and party building simultaneously in Baltimore and in Maryland over the last couple of years. So, all right. So the goal is to understand, discuss, and develop a strategy for how we can use electoral politics to grow state and local Green parties. There's a list of topics to cover beneath this, and we'll get to those in time. I think that this is going to be a sort of very high level, touching on a lot of these things, sharing our experiences and what we've learned, and then there's opportunity to dig deeper into any of them. But really I'm trying to put together the sort of, you know, we're not going deep into any of these things. We're just going to talk about them as part of the overall strategy. So about me and why I'm speaking on this topic, I am a current Green Party candidate for state delegate in Maryland's 45th Legislative District. I am running as a 2-person Green Party slate for 3 seats. There's 3 seats per district in Maryland, and we are trying to put together a coalition that crosses race, age, religion, and a lot of different things of Greens coming from different sides. And we were taking on the current House Whip and the leader of the Legislative Black Caucus. So it should be a pretty challenging race. I am a Baltimore City and Maryland Green Party. I'm a former Baltimore City and Maryland Green Party co-chair, and I've worked to expand the depth of the Baltimore City chapter so that we are in more communities where we are most needed. And I've also worked to expand the state party chapters across Maryland. At the beginning of the 2016 electoral cycle, we had 3 county-level chapters in Maryland. At this point, we have 11, and our goal is by 2020 is to have chapters in all 24 counties in the state, so that we can be, we can be a statewide party. I worked closely on the Joshua Harris campaign for mayor in 2016. For those of you who are not aware, Joshua was a young, vibrant Green who got a lot of attention and was our first Baltimore City mayoral candidate. He got 20,000 votes in that election, got 10%, which is probably about 7% higher than anybody expected from him, and really put the Green Party back on the map in Baltimore as a party for progressives, but also for young folks and millennials. So I also supported other candidates up and down the ballot in 2016, from hosting a Jill Stein rally in Baltimore to helping out with Margaret Flowers to helping state and local and city council candidates. I became a Green when I realized that voter apathy in a one-party city like Baltimore was the way that the status quo was able to maintain itself, and that really what we needed to figure out was how to operationalize democracy in places like that. And I realized that the Green Party aligned with my values and was the best way to do that. And before that, I was an Urban Debate League organizer and a national champion debate coach. I helped get the Los Angeles Urban Debate League started and helped get the Baltimore City Middle School Urban Debate League started, and that helped me, that led to me being a Green. So let's get on with it. So the first thing I think that when you're thinking about building a party and via an election is to have a theory of the campaign and to have a multi-year plan. So situate what you're doing this year within a multi-year and multi-election plan to make the Green Party connect to a larger movement grounded in the communities that you serve. So for this, I think we want to start at the end. Start thinking about what we want to do for the next election, and ask ourselves, what is the goal for the party, the district, and the candidate? How would governing work if you were elected? After all, most Greens that would get elected as Greens would probably be one of very few Greens. How would you make coalitions? How would you get things passed? How would you govern? The next question is, why should the Green Party and the candidate represent the people of the district? If they're not there now, and there aren't people necessarily clamoring for a bigger Green Party, why does the Green Party think that it should be the leader? And the next question, again, for the next election down the road is, who are your allies, your base, and your coalition? Start thinking about who you want to be representing and who you want to be working with when you do win, so that you can build those relationships this time around. And then the last question on this is, when do the residents benefit from your campaign and your election? We all know that governing is not just having the best ideas. And so we need to think about being able to give a reasonable answer that explains when the ideas that we talk about and are selling people on are going to come into action. So if that's the frame that you have for what you're trying to do with the next election and what you're trying to build with this election, then you can ask some more tactical questions about this one. What are the goals of the campaign? What are you trying to achieve? How do you implement them? How does the community get involved? Why does this campaign this year in this district exist? Who's the candidate and who's the campaign trying to reach? Where is the race, and when does the campaign start and end? And if you can put these two things together and understand what you need to do this year to move yourself toward the next election, that's the general framework that you want to use in order to think about party building through elections. So the next part of this I want to talk about is talking about the party, talking about the campaign, and branding that. So a few assumptions here. One, people make most of their decisions about political parties based on candidates they associate with those parties. Most people aren't paying attention to the party when it's not during an election season, and most people aren't paying attention to the platform. They know about candidates, and so candidates are really important in helping to build the party because that's how most people are going to interact with the party that you're trying to build. 2, openness to third party prefers to work with state and local level versus national level. And I'd add a caveat on this, which is I think that this is theoretically true and may sometimes actually be true. But I think most people say they like the idea of third parties, and most people like the idea that that should happen at the state and local level. If you're in one of the many jurisdictions around the country that is either deep blue or deep red, people are particularly receptive to really a third party that operates as a second party and gives people choices where oftentimes there aren't any. Next is most voters who are willing to vote for Green Party candidates are not Greens. I think this is really important to remember when you're trying to think about how you build your campaign and how you build your party. There are 3 types of people, I think, that are going to be supporters that are coming from a campaign. The first are people who will vote for the candidate. The second are people who will vote for the candidate, volunteer for the candidate, donate, things like that. And the third are people who are going to decide to be part of the party. In the party building goal, you're trying to get the third group, but to win the election, you're trying to get the other 2. So that tension is something that people need to remember, is that when candidates are the apparatus for building the party, most of the people they're appealing to are not Greens. The next is the 4 pillars of the Green Party are a good framework for a campaign and good for party building. All of the literature that we hand out in our state delegate campaign right now has the 4 pillars on it, and we use them to frame our approach to the problems and solutions that face our community. So we've taken the 4 pillars and adopted them for East Baltimore, and I think that that's a good process to go through, because we can go there and say, these are our values, this is our framework, and this is what drives us. And one of the things that I think is that most of the other parties don't put values forward. And if we can run toward and not from the Green Party pillars, which are time-tested and are good values, I think it helps to make campaigns and party building work together without having to reinvent the wheel. Now, the 5th pillar should absolutely be good governance and independence from the duopoly. Remember that most voters willing to vote for Green candidates are not Greens, which means that there are a lot of independents who are willing just to see somebody tell it like it is, honestly participate in government, and be independent from the duopoly. If you're the best independent on the ballot, that can help you build the party too. And remember, we are the party of grassroots democracy. We are the one who is trying to make government work for the people again, and I think that's a valuable message. Other valuable message is that money matters. We are right on campaign finance, and we need to tell people that. That may oftentimes, in my experience, get people interested in ways that the other things don't necessarily, but talk about the money. We're right on it, and even if other people and other candidates are starting to adopt clean money stances, we need to continue to remind people that we've been there and we will continue to be there. Policy matters. We cannot program or politic our way out of bad policy. And when we see things that are problems based on policy, often because of the money that's involved in politics or because of a lack of values or because of a lack of good governance, we need to fix those things with policy. And we need to make sure that we're communicating that to people. People who are the victim or who are suffering from bad policy know that policy is the reason for their problems. They may not know the solutions, and that's on you as a candidate, but they do know that policy matters, and they're not avoiding policy. Last thing is find and know your why. Running a campaign trying to build a party is a lot of work, and you've got to continually remind yourself and understand why it is exactly that you're doing this, and allow that to remind you of all the other things going through it. So next part of this is I want to talk a little bit about interacting with social media as part of building a campaign. So the first part is we have a phrase that we like to use to sort of describe the parts of a campaign that are important, and or some of the parts that are important, and we say doors, digital, and dollars. And local campaigns are tactically won based on these things. Greens can easily win digital. We have a good message, we have good branding, and we're good on policy and issues. It can also drive the other two, and it's cost effective. So really focus on what your message is going to be, how you're going to tell the story, and make sure that you have a social media strategy that is reaching out to new voters and able to, and is a key part of what you're doing. Second thing is engage with voters, media, and other candidates. Find communities you can take part in and use social media to amplify groups that you like. Too often, I think that people, when they're trying to build a campaign, only go one direction with their social media and aren't very engaging. I think it works much better and shows much more that you are a people's candidate and part of the community when you're using the social media to engage voters, media, and other candidates. And, you know, when I say engage other candidates, if you have policy disagreements with another candidate and you can engage them in Twitter or you can engage them in Facebook, don't shy away from that. You know, be careful, but engage that. And now, here's the next point. Don't do that too much. You're never not in public, and behave yourself. Far too many of us can get in trouble really easily by going on social media, talking loudly, and having to apologize. When you're running or when you're trying to build a party, you're always on display, you're always in public. So the last part about this is targeting. Learn how to use the ad platforms. It's really a great way to reach voters. Yesterday I was watching a video on Daily Motion, and the state senator in our district, who's 75 years old and not great at technology, but he had an ad at the beginning of it that was targeted directly to our district, and it talks specifically about our zip code. So think about this. With Facebook and with some of these other tools, you can target zip code-based things within the place that you're running. If there's a zip code that is particularly bad off because of the business-as-usual politics that you've been experiencing, then you can put together a video or an ad that goes directly to them. It's really powerful. The targeting tools are great, and the more that you know your district, your issues, and your data, you can use them better. So how does this interact with the old school media? The first thing here is introduce yourself. I think a lot of times when people start running, they assume that the reporter who is covering them knows who they are because they've seen their name on the registry of candidates, they've gone and checked out their website, they've read the issues, and that the reason they're not covering them is because they don't like you because you're green. Sometimes that may be true, but don't assume your local media knows who you are, even if you think they do. Introduce yourself, be friendly. Build a relationship. If you want to build a relationship with a reporter or an editor, it can happen. You just have to build it, and you have to be trustworthy. You have to trust them, understand their job, and be clear when you disagree that you disagree for a reason, but also that when you agree, you agree. We've been able here to build decent relationships with Baltimore Sun reporters, with Baltimore Sun editors, also with alternative media and other things, and it's by really working to build those relationships. Ask nicely in public. If you are not covered in a story about an election and you think you should be, publicly ask why it is that that reporter didn't cover you. Have the conversation. We were able to get the Baltimore, small thing, but by simply asking the Baltimore Sun, we were able to get every story about the primary election to include Greens that were in the general election, just as a matter of course. So now, instead of saying 4 candidates will be running for the state Senate position, it says 4 candidates will be running in the state Senate position and will be facing off against Green candidates such and such in the November. It's good to have those conversations and ask to do it. Also, help the reporter sell the story. If you want a reporter to write that story, help them explain why their editor should do it. Most of the time, they don't think that people care about third parties, and oftentimes they're right. You have to make there be a hook, make it be something interesting, and help them sell that story. So these things, of course, reinforce each other. What you do on social media helps to drive the media coverage that you can get, especially in this day and era where something that happens, where observing something that happens on a social media site can become news. And it goes the other way too. use the media that is about you in order to continue to build a repertoire of information within the community and within the party. Next thing we want to talk about is changing the universe of voters, understanding the universe of people that you're trying to build with and how to change it. So the data elements that are available, and this varies by place, but you have election results, you have voter information. These are things like address, age, race, and then you have voting history, and this tells you when people voted and when they didn't vote in elections. There's also census-based info that has nothing to do with elections that is available for a lot of places and can tell you things like which zip codes are, which parts of your community pay the highest auto insurance rate, or which of them have the most student loan debt, or which of them are most likely to be seeded with a toxic site. This occurs at the census level and at the zip code level, and a lot of this stuff helps you to tell the story of why you need to change what you have going on right now. So this leads us to the electoral universe. And I think that one theory that you should understand is that the electoral universe, the people who vote right now, who are part of the status quo of voting, are not likely to be the place where Greens are going to build the type of campaigns that it can allow them to build the party. So if your universe of voters includes super voters, who are the people who vote every time, likely for the same party no matter what, swing voters, who are that small sliver of people usually at the center right who are willing to vote both, or who are willing to vote one or the other of the main two parties. And then you have irregular voters, who are folks that don't regular vote, that, they vote sometimes, but not at all, not usually. Non-voters just are registered but don't vote. New voters are young folks, and fall-off voters are people who vote for the top of the ticket but not the bottom of the ticket. All right, so that says where we are. So the question is, how do you want to change this? And this is really where the party building part of this comes in. The first part is engage new non- and irregular voters. The pathway for Greens to get into office is to engage different people than the ones who make the decisions right now. We have to create new blocks of voters, we have to talk to people who are new voters, and we have to get the irregular voters a reason to vote. Now, that takes, of course, knowing who those folks are, and if you can get specific identification of who your irregular voters are, who your non-voters are, and who your new voters are, you can make sure that you are focusing your campaign efforts on them. Now, the next thing is create new swing votes. So oftentimes we think of swing voters as being people who are going to vote blue or red, who are going to vote Dem or Republican. But Greens need to create a new swing on the different side of that spectrum. So there's folks in highly Democratic areas who will vote for a good Green because that person speaks to their issues better. So identify how you're going to create those new swing votes that occur in different parts of the spectrum than where people are used to. The third thing, and I can't stress this one enough, is control fall-off. If you were running in a state delegate or state senate race, and there are a whole bunch of, and there's also a gubernatorial race going on, or a United States Senate race, people are going to vote on the top of the ticket and not vote on their way down. So this is one of those places where you have to have good folks at the polling place, making sure that you are putting something in everybody's hand and talking to them so that they can, you can easily pick up those folks who weren't otherwise going to vote. The last thing on this is micro-target with zip code-based data. So in our district here in Baltimore, we have 3 of the highest auto insurance rate zip codes of any zip codes in the United States. And we also have a legislator who sat on the committee where legislation that would have allowed that to be addressed didn't get moved, didn't get passed. So we're taking out flyers in those 3 zip codes, and we're saying things like, you want to know why your auto insurance costs so much? Here's the policy basis behind it, and here's the solution to it. That also works for us in our district with 2 zip codes that have high levels of asthma, and policy hasn't been passed for that. Data in that case is your friend, and you can use it in order to really make a change and make an impact in a small part of a community by really figuring out issues that are affecting those folks, reaching out to folks, and communicating with them on it. All right, so that leads us to reaching voters where they are. There's no substitute for knocking on doors, going to community events, and being present. But if we're trying to build the party, we have to do that in a way that's not just the sort of delivery of information and delivery of a script that we're used to with political campaigns, where they're simply trying to get a transactional exchange with the voter. So we need to present our values, and we need to lead with green values as an explanation for why we're there, and begin to and use that as an opportunity to begin a conversation. And then we need to listen to residents' concerns and aspirations. I think one thing that we too often do as Greens is assume that the world is bad for everybody as we see the status quo of politics. And I think that if you ask a voter what their concerns and their needs are, but also the things they like and what they hope to get out of the community, that you can begin a good conversation. And we can talk more in there's another slide in a second about the technique of deep canvassing, but I really do think that if you're trying to build the party and you're starting with this year's election, most of your canvassing should be a deeper, more listening to canvassing. So identify problems created by a service gap. If you're going to be talking to irregular voters, one thing that you'll notice is that if they ignore their politicians often ignore them. So if you're a super voter and you vote in every single election and you call your city council person or you call your state legislature, they're probably pretty likely to try to address you and to connect you with the services that you need. But if you're an irregular voter or a non-voter, the less that you participate in the process, the less likely the process is to participate back with you. So if you hear somebody complaining about something that is a service gap that is not reaching them, identify that. Also, identify problems created by policy. So if you are talking to folks and they say that their auto insurance rate is much higher here than it is across the way where their cousin lives or something like that, then you need to be able to understand how and why that problem is created by the policy. So some of this is listening, and then the next step is learn about the community leaders and services that already exist. Oftentimes, if you're talking to somebody, they will know somebody who's helping them to address things, somebody who they like, a program that their kids participate in. Learn about these things, because in those particular communities, those things matter. Follow up with solutions. So one of the great things about this model, this deep canvassing model that actually has follow-ups with it, is that people don't expect politicians to follow up with them. So if you knock on somebody's door and you ask them what their problems are and they tell you, and you call them back with a solution, that's not something that people expect. And that helps to build that and maintain that relationship, which you're going to need in order to work with them, not just as a voter, but hopefully as somebody who you can get into the movement that you're working with. Now, I mentioned deep canvassing above, and I'm not going to go through the whole thing here, but I'll make sure that I send this out. But party building should rely on deep canvassing. That means going to people and listening to what they're talking about and allowing the voters to draw their own conclusions. It's much different than the typical retail politics that Democrats and Republicans and even progressives teach you to engage in, which is go there, tell them your script, hand them your piece of paper, ask them what you need from them, and then move on and get as many doors as you can. Quality interactions while you are trying to build and trying to understand will help you have a deeper knowledge of what's going on in the community, but will also help to maintain and build the relationship. So there's a lot that you can read out there about deep canvassing, but I do think that it should be your method of door-to-door and of reaching people when you are trying to build. The next thing I want to talk about is policy matters and community matters. Policy matters. There's just no other way to say it. We can't program our way out of the bad consequences of policy decisions. We must name the problem and offer a solution. Too often, I think that there is an evasiveness of getting into the nitty-gritty of policy because we want to focus on larger issues or we want to focus on things that are more community-based. And I think that is a problem that we need to get away from, and we need to use the GPUS platform and the values as a good framework for the direction of policy. Now, this doesn't mean that it's always going to speak to what is going on in your local area, in your city, in your town, or in your state, but it does set a good direction. And then I think the next key to that is work with grassroots organizations to localize and apply that framework. So let's go back to the auto insurance example in Maryland. So in Maryland, auto insurance, you're allowed to discriminate based on gender, you're allowed to discriminate based on education, and you're allowed to discriminate based on employment. And then, so that's on the consumer side. And then on the criminal side, there is criminal penalties for driving without insurance. So what you end up with is people who have higher insurance rates because they're poor, because they're women, and because they don't have higher education in the same way, that are forced to drive to jobs that are 30, 40 minutes away. And you have a criminal penalty. For driving without a driver's license. So the policy solution here came from both consumer protection organizations and from organizations that are trying to decriminalize poverty. And so what we're doing is we're working with those organizations to really understand the work that they've done around this and to support both the short-term, and this is the next point, work within the existing political imagination and beyond it, to support both a short-term approach to this, which is to say, to push a piece of legislation that says prohibit non-policy or non-driving related conditions on auto insurance, and then to push a bigger version which says let's work toward a non-market-based solution and to consider municipalizing the practice of auto insurance. That's an example. Joshua Harris's platform for the 2016 mayoral race was another beautiful example of this, and I can share that in the notes afterwards. But Joshua worked with organizations from all across the city, the state, and the nation to really put a fine point on the specific policies that would be necessary to follow the Green Party platform and address Baltimore's issues. And I think it's the kind of document that made people excited to see an expanded political imagination. Now, the other part of this is community matters too. We can't just be policy wonks. We have to combine a real base in the communities that we're trying to serve with the policy solutions and the value-driven approach. So one is don't speak for others. No matter how good the idea, if it's not based on the lived experience of people most affected by it, then it won't work. I think today some of us saw this when Cynthia Nixon was talking about her marijuana reparations policy, and a lot of folks, a lot of black folks and Black Lives Matter said that she shouldn't be talking about it as reparations. I think that this is an interesting example of where being detached from that community can get you in some trouble. So it's not that the policy was bad, it's just it felt speaking for others-ish in that case. So the second thing is to engage people throughout the process, work collaboratively, and build community around policy change. So I think people are willing to engage in the process of the solution. They're willing to engage in being part of government, and all of these things help them to feel more connected. But you have to engage them throughout the process. Too often I think people engage at the end of the process after decisions have already been made, and I think that while you may have the right solutions, there's a lot that is important to understand about the problems and to work collaboratively with people to come up with that. And then the last part is identify unsung leaders. This is a really key part of community building, and has helped in Baltimore, has helped us to have folks who have been in the community for a very long time doing that work, but haven't been getting the credit for it, and that's helping us build deeper into mostly black working class communities where there's really a need for Green Party presence, but absent some unsung leaders to help build community with, it's very difficult to get in there. So that part is really key. Find out the people who the people in the community look up to and trust, and make sure that they're part of the group. So the last part about the last two parts about this is that you need to identify attainable goals short of winning. And part of the reason, and this should be a plan with tangible goals. And the reason for this is because at some point you're going to start feeling as if you may not win your election. You may still win your election, but you're going to start feeling like you may not win it at some point, and there needs to be tangible goals from our experience of what you're trying to do with the election that you're running, and those should be both in this term and in the term beyond that. And if you don't have those, it becomes really easy on a hot August day to say, you know what, instead of going and knocking doors today, I'm going to stay inside and watch some baseball and put on the Netflix, because if there's not a goal that you're working toward other than just winning, it's really easy to quit. And we found that with a lot of candidates who either think that it is all or nothing. Once they realize it might not be ever, or it might not be all, they stop doing anything. And so that having the plan with tangible goals helps to stop that. The next thing is overperform expectations. I think that when you go into a general election, especially if you're new, if your Green Party is new to running candidates at that level, or just in general, you should try to understand where people expect that you're going to finish and do better than that. So if there's an expectation that you're going to get 7% and your goal is to get 15%, that doubling of expectations helps to build the party in the long term, because if people know that you did better than they thought you were going to do, then they start to pay attention to you in the cycles after the election. The next thing is keep good records, keep good contacts. One of the most valuable things that you can do in any election is gather the emails, phone numbers, and addresses of the people who are interested in you, who like the candidate, who like the campaign, or who are looking for something different. Those folks can be great people to talk to about building the party in the future, and they'll be helpful for you for the next campaign. The next thing is build relationships. Build relationships with organizations, build relationships with community associations, build relationships with media, build relationships with businesses. These are the type of things that will help you to have a presence in communities going past this particular election. And the last thing is be honest about the why. If you don't think that, I think this part is tough, but I think that voters appreciate it when you say what you're trying to do, what the long-term vision is, what the goal is, and why you're making the case for a change. Because I think a lot of times people understand the necessity for a change, but they want to know what your vision of the new world is, and they want to know what your vision of why you're doing this outside of the traditional box is. So next steps, and then I'm done. The first is, and takeaways, I guess, these should be. But the first is know your why. Know what you're doing. Remind yourself every day why you are doing this and why you're willing to commit to it. The second is plan your work your plan. You can't build something 5 years down the road without a plan. If you do have a plan, though, you have to stick to it and use it to hold yourself accountable and understand what else you need to do. But the ultimate goal must be to have a plan. You must have, and this is number 3, a vision of what the world looks like after or as you're doing your work. So how does your city, state, or nation look different 5 years down the road as your plan comes to fruition? Know what that is and communicate it. And then the last thing on this is build community and make sure that your election is doing something that is enduring and is not just the ephemeral knock on the door and the brochure that gets everybody excited, but that the work that you're putting in is actually building community for not just the next election, but also the next time when you need to have a movement that you work with in order to achieve political goals short of winning and short of elections. So I'm done with this part of it, and open to conversation, questions, or criticism.
Wow. So thank you. I'm gonna slowly unmute everyone and just say, first of all, thank you, Andy. That was a lot of content, and it was really good and comprehensive, and I know a lot of people had takeaways from your presentation already, because I know I did. And I've been doing this a long time, so this is great. All right, so I'm slowly, Barbara, I'm putting you back on mute. Sorry. If you have a question, chat in the chat box. And I'm here. I don't know if I'm hearing it through Andy's computer, but I'm definitely hearing myself as an echo. All right, so I'm going to take people off mute and, ask questions. If you don't hear yourself, I'm still unmuting you.
Hillary?
Yes?
I'd like to know a lot more about the build community. How does he envision that working?
Andy?
Yeah, so I think one of the best ways to do it is first to listen and to talk to people, and the deep canvassing method, I think, of trying to communicate with people helps to set up the building of community, because you're spending longer talking to them and getting to know them. The second thing, I think, is organize around policy. Organizing around policy that directly affects people and putting in the work to help them with something that they're addressing helps a lot. And then the third thing is provide connection to services and resources. So if you talk to somebody and they say, my son has a community college degree and he's having a hard time getting a job, think about how you would answer that question. Have workforce tools to connect them to. Know the providers in the community so that you can connect people to that.
Thanks.
I wanted to say thank you for this presentation. I'm not running right now, but this gives me a whole lot of ideas about how to grow the party, and that's something that we really need to practice in our county, because that has been a struggle. And I like the idea of really knowing your district and knowing your community and bringing things that are of interest to people, and also listening to them and what they need.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Other comments, questions, feedback?
Yeah, this is Lee Novak here in Detroit. I did really like that aspect of your presentation, Andy, about building community, as well as the look at things over a series of elections rather than just at one election at a time. Just to add a little bit about that building community, certainly become involved in other community organizations. Here in Detroit, the Detroit Green Party helped found the People's Water Board Coalition, which works to bring clean, affordable water to, first of all, was to the citizens of Detroit, and now has grown to be a statewide and internationally known organization around the water struggle. Of course, this has occurred over, 8 to 10 to 12 years. It's not something that happens overnight and takes a lot of hard work. But it seemed to be an important part of Andy's plan here, and I think it is an important part of building the Green Party.
Yeah, thank you, Lou. And the water work there in Detroit is a good example of how this works to think over a multiple year time and to try to build with folks so that you are working to address issues that matter to them. So I appreciate that example, and I think it's a good part of how we do this work.
I'll have to add. I have to add that auto insurance is also a big issue here. So I'd like to talk to you in the future about some of those policy options.
For sure. And I mean, like I said, we are working with two types of organizations here. We're working with consumer protection organizations, but we're also working with the Job Opportunity Task Force, which is trying to take away barriers caused by the criminal justice system to folks who are seeking employment. So those are sort of our grassroots accountability partners on that. So
Very cool. Thank you.
That last comment, Lou, was making me, it was reminding me that years and years ago when I was co-chair or chair of the Philadelphia party, I really wanted to create like an urban caucus, you know, like reach out, you know, who's the Green Party leader in New York and Baltimore and Detroit, et cetera, because I think there's certain policy issues and just, you know, challenges that we deal with that are different from people in suburban and rural communities who probably also have needs to get together along similar geographic lines. And Andy, I keep muting you and unmuting you because every time somebody else talks, I think I hear feedback from your computer. So are you unmuted?
Yeah, I mean, Hillary, I think that's definitely the case, that we need to have urban coalitions. And one of the things that we've tried to do here in Maryland is think about how to remake the political map. So the way that it has been for us in the state for a long time is we have a bunch of rural red counties, and then we have suburban and urban blue counties. And one of the things we've been trying to do is to build connections within the cities within the rural counties. So you have your sort of Western Maryland cities that are facing many of the same problems that Baltimore is on a different scale. And we've been really trying to reorient, so we're building along lines of class struggle as opposed to lines of political allegiance, and have found it to be pretty interesting. We have about 10 state delegate candidates running this year, and they're all trying to we're all trying to work somewhat together on a platform that addresses big cities, small cities, and rural areas.
My next question was going to be about the like states that are like tend to run one party, which is where I'm in Washington State. It's very blue for the most part. Once you go east side, then it gets red. But you've been blue for quite a while, and the idea of having a Green Party candidate, it can be kind of hard to isolate as a selling point or something that we're giving back. And I like the idea of the class politics. That's one thing that we could look at, since homelessness is a huge factor over here. And so I'm just looking if you have any other ideas of different types of talking pieces that we can use to kind of separate out, or that you have seen used in areas that focus on one party.
So Baltimore has not elected anybody but a Republican since like 1965. So we're in a deep blue place, and almost in most of our races that we run here in Baltimore, the Greens beat the Republicans. And so what it's taking to move to really expand our base is in that targeting piece and in the expanding and changing the electoral universe piece. So it's about finding the people who are not currently voting or are not regularly voting or vote in one kind of election and not the other, and understanding and connecting with why they do. This is one of the places where I find that there's a lot of people who agree about corruption, agree about bad government, agree that money in politics ties directly to things that hurt them. And I think that a lot of the folks who are in the sort of irregular and non-voters group are really the key to understanding what the silent or what the unspoken herd of the discontent with the one-party Democrats is. So I would say figure out how to deep canvass the irregular voters and try to understand why they're not voting regularly. And a lot of times it comes down to something like they want to drain the swamp, you know? I mean, it's as simple as that. I mean, we're not supposed to say drain the swamp because we're Greens and we know that swamps are good. But the concept of we need to throw the bums out, we need to get rid of this corrupt influence politics that doesn't help or do anything for me is really prevalent amongst the folks who regularly don't vote. And the communities that regularly don't vote. So a lot of our insight has really come from not trying to figure out how to make the regular Democrats vote for the Greens, but also trying to talk to the other folks who aren't regularly voting, figure out why, and figure out what we can do to address those needs.
Great. Other comments, questions? It just hit 10 o'clock where I am, so.
One question is, you said something about there was literature about the deep canvassing.
Yeah, there's a lot of good literature about deep canvassing out there for organizing, for party building. I know Surge as a group does a lot of deep canvassing. So you know that is out there, and there's good resources for it that are both free and available. I can send forward when I send the slide deck to Hillary, I can put a few of those links in there as well.
That would be super.
That would be great.
Great. I have a question.
Yes, go.
Yeah, this is Josh from Massachusetts. So what we're doing up here is what we do every midterm. You know, if our candidate doesn't get 3% of the vote, then the Green Rainbow Party loses political party status, and then we're back to political designation. And so then in the midterm, it's upon us to run statewide candidates, and they have to achieve at least 3% of the vote, and they usually do, and then we become a political party again, and that brings down the signature requirement to get our presidential candidate on the ballot. Well, anyway, so the thing that that is the alternate thing to that is instead of achieving 3% of the vote in the general election in the midterm, is we could eventually build up our membership or our registered Green Rainbow Party voter count to whatever the count is to be an actual state party without, you know what I mean, to just get that number. And the cool thing about Massachusetts is that citizens as young as 16 may sign up or may pre-register to vote. And so I think that the question I'd like to put to you is, what do you think about, what do you think about the kids? How would we appeal to them as far as bringing them into the Green Party?
Okay, so I think that's a good question. I mean, I think that you have to put youth at the center of the work, and that means that there have to be young people that are part of your local Green Party. That means there have to be young people that are part of campaign teams. And so one of the ways that we're trying to do this is, and our state delegate it's 2, 5, 10 hours a week. we're still going to try to make sure that that goes to a young green who's been active and participating. So one of the parts of it is put youth at the center and preference young people with your hiring decisions if you're raising enough money to do so. I think that if you talk about, we hope, we'll see, but our goal is to build the party by making sure that hiring young folks, make sure there are folks to carry the torch on who have worked with elections. So the second thing I'll say is I think that the social media is a good way to reach young people. I mean, they are there, and you have to have folks who know what they're doing to not step into puddles and traps. But yeah, that's where people are, and I think you can reach them there. And I think that good video that is well targeted on Facebook and YouTube can reach a lot of folks. I think that we actually have a great opportunity now in some ways that we never did before, which is we can, from our laptops, make production quality videos that we target right onto people's screens within small or big areas. So if you're running a statewide campaign and you can get access to things like which zip codes have the highest student debt in Massachusetts, or which zip codes in Massachusetts have the highest incarceration rates, or what zip codes have the highest medical insurance rate. I think you can target young folks by talking about those economic anxiety issues that really address their future, and you can put together content that is reaching them quite specifically. The last thing I'll say about this is in Maryland, we have to get 1% in the gubernatorial race or in the presidential race in order to keep our ballot access. Otherwise, we have to petition again. So we really are looking at our win number for these elections as, for the 1% election for the gubernatorial, we're saying we have to get 25,000 votes out of the pool, out of the universe of votes in the state. And I think that sometimes it's actually easier to do campaign craft on these 1% to 3% type of things, because your number is really pretty precise, and you can be narrow, you can be targeted, and you can build in particular areas in order to boost that number and to make sure you get to it. I like those type of races better than ones that we have to win, actually.
Great.
Thank you.
Question here from, hold on, let me mute you. Okay, so I have a question here from M. Ward in New Mexico, who is unable to use her microphone, I guess, and also can't seem to chat in the chat box. So she's saying, what about starting from growing the party when you don't have a candidate, like a local candidate, but focusing on growing the party specifically to increase the pool of potential candidates, as opposed to sort of, I think we can all get how if you're running a campaign really well, that can serve as a way to grow the party. But I think more in the opposite direction of, like, what are some strategies for focusing on party building so that you can lay the groundwork for future campaigns, even if you don't currently have a campaign right now?
Yeah, I think that's a good question, and I think a lot of the same tactics can really work. I think the deep canvassing is a really good opportunity in that case, and I think the concept of identifying community leaders and resources can really help you to build the type of coalitions and teams that you'll need for when you do have a candidate. I also think that it's still a 5-year goal. It's still building relationships. It's still listening to people, and it's still, I think, focusing on policy and community. It's just a different role to have the party doing that instead of having a candidate do that. But a lot of the tactics and techniques are still the same. And so I think that if there is, and I think through that process, I think through the deep canvas, the focus on policy and the focus on community, you'll start to identify folks who can be candidates in future races because you're doing the community building work necessary. That would be my answer about that.
Great.
Is it possible that they could do community or county or precinct ward committees where they can go out and meet people and be kind of the information builders?
For sure. So I think that the lowest, like whatever the public office is that you can run for, right? Whether it's ward commissioner or something like that, having those roles, I think, begins to build community around a leader, begins to build trust, and so I sort of always encourage people to run for whatever is available. But if those things are nonpartisan or they're non-electoral, I also think that it's really important to make sure that you're getting people on boards and commissions. So last year in Baltimore City, we pushed to get somebody on the Civilian Oversight Task Force, which oversaw the recommendations of the Department of Justice consent decree about the Baltimore City Police that came as a result of the Freddie Gray uprising. And so we were able to get one Baltimore City Green onto that commission and board. And I know in Western Maryland, the Allegheny County Greens are trying to do that. Anything that you can get people on that puts you as part of the community, whether that be official, whether that be elected, whether it be volunteer, I think is a good way to show people that Greens in leadership is not scary, it's not bad, and it gets things done in ways that people don't know about and people aren't used to. I think once people know that, they begin to consider candidates in the party.
Great. All right. Any other final questions before we call it a night? All right. Well, I'm gonna just thank Andy for doing such a great job. You've clearly put a lot of time and effort into this presentation, as well as into your Green Party organizing in general. So hats off to you, and a big thank you for all of that time and effort. Good luck on your campaign, for sure. The fact that, like, when I heard that you were an active candidate, I almost uninvited you because I never want candidates to be spending time on anything other than their campaign. But I'm really glad that I didn't. So thank you so much, and I'm also going to thank Robert Smith from Maryland, who is a new CCC member and is the one who recommended that you be our speaker. So I think that's it. What I've done is I've recorded the call, and I'm actually going to stop recording right now.